What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in this video I'm going to be going through my Week 8 top 36 wide receivers with tiers. If you guys enjoy the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you want to check out my running back rankings, those are already posted on my channel. But let's just dive right into it, starting off with Tier 1. We're going to have 7 wide receivers, starting it off with Tyreek Hill. Dude's been a monster all season long. He's going to be my number 1 wide receiver this week. Then we're going to have Stephon Diggs, also been great, going up against the Bucks. These guys are all locks in your lineup. A.J. Brown has been on an absolute tear. Expect him to keep that going here against the Commanders. Jamar Chase, excited to see how Joe Burrow looks coming out of the bye. Obviously not the best matchup against the 49ers, but if Joe Burrow's looking healthy, him and Jamar Chase are going to put up numbers regardless of who they're going up against. Cooper Kupp, coming off a down game, still expect him to be a high-end wide receiver 1. Tough matchup against the Cowboys, but still a top option at the wide receiver position. Then we have Keenan Allen. I like the matchup here against the Bears. I think they're probably going to be able to put up a lot of points. Keenan Allen has been a volume machine this season, so I like him in that matchup. And then wrapping up this Tier 1, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Dude has been a volume monster over the last couple of weeks, going up against the Raiders here. I think he's a nice mid-tier wide receiver 1 option. Now shifting into Tier 2, only 4 guys in this tier. Going to start it off with Davante Adams. Now I understand Davante Adams has been disappointing over the last 3-ish weeks, but he's getting Jimmy Garoppolo back. Pretty solid matchup here against the Lions. I think Davante Adams is still a locked-in wide receiver 1, really not panicking at all. All these top wide receivers are going to have a few down games here or there. I still think Davante Adams is an elite wide receiver, which is why I have him leading Tier 2. Then we're going to have Puka Nacua. Even in a tough matchup, Puka and Cooper Kupp have just been absolutely dominating the touches and the targets there for the Rams. I think both of these guys are strong plays. I like Puka even as a top 10 wide receiver this week. Then we are going to have CeeDee Lamb going up against the Rams. Hasn't necessarily had a fantastic start to the season, but I do think this Cowboys offense should probably pick it up a little bit, coming off a strong game prior to the bye. So I do like Lamb this week here as a top 10 guy. And then at wide receiver 11, going to have Brandon Ayuk. I would be surprised if Debo played in this one. The initial report was that he was probably going to miss at least 2 weeks. So if you have Brandon Ayuk, playing as the wide receiver 1 for the 49ers, it's a pretty good spot. They may be without Brock Purdy, so it could be Sam Darnold. I still think Sam Darnold is competent enough to feed his weapons, right? These weapons are stacked. O-line's really solid. I think Ayuk will be fine. Without Debo, he should command a lot of volume. And then shifting into a pretty large Tier 3 here, we're going to start off with Adam Thielen. Now, I had been pretty low on Adam Thielen, pretty much the entire season. Didn't love him coming into it. Thought he was a sell high option early on. I did not think his production was sustainable. He has put up 6 very, very impressive weeks. So at this point, just got to buy in. The dude's been on fire, a volume machine. So I have him here as a wide receiver 1, a top 12 wide receiver. He starts off this tier. Then we're going to have Chris Olave. Really, the only thing holding Chris Olave back here is the touchdowns. He has 1 touchdown in 6 or 7 games. Not sure if they've had their bye yet. But a lot of other wide receivers, in the same point per game range, have gotten to the end zone multiple times. So I think Olave will be fine. Like him as a high-end wide receiver 2. Then we're going to have Mike Evans. Dude has clearly been the Buccaneers wide receiver 1 this season. Like him as a high-end wide receiver 2 play. Nico Collins coming off the bye week. We have seen Nico Collins play in 6 games. The dude has been pretty impressive. He has been C.J. Stroud's clear wide receiver 1, and C.J. Stroud has wildly outperformed expectations. Like him here against the Panthers at wide receiver 15. Another guy who has kind of outperformed expectations is Jacoby Myers. I think a lot of people thought this offense wouldn't be that great with Jimmy G at the quarterback position. You already have Davante Adams funneling a lot of targets. But Jacoby Myers has come in. He's been very involved week to week. His only down game was without Jimmy G. You get Jimmy G back this week. Like I said with Davante, I like the matchup against the Lions. 6, 7 games into the season for some of these guys. The dudes have been balling out. You just got to put some respect on their name. That's what I'm doing here with Jacoby Myers. Behind Myers, we're going to have Jalen Waddle. A little bit of an underwhelming start to the season here. He hasn't had any of those crazy explosive boom games. Now dealing with a back injury. If he didn't have that injury, maybe I rank him a few spots higher, but he's going to settle in as a mid-tier wide receiver 2. Another guy like a wide receiver 2 on a top offense, underperformed so far, Devonta Smith. I know a lot of people are worried Personally, I'm not. Like, when you have A.J. Brown going for 120 plus yards over the last few weeks, it's going to be tough for another wide receiver to deliver great production. At some point, A.J. Brown is going to slip a little bit. Devontae Adams is going to have Devonta Smith is going to have a big game, and then everything will feel fine. Maybe he's not going to pay off at the wide receiver 11, 12 price you drafted him at, but I think he'll be a fine mid to high end wide receiver 2 rest of season. Clearly a very, very talented player. And after like 2 weeks, you had people saying he was the wide receiver 1 here. We can't go from thinking he's that talented to all of a sudden, he's not even like a wide receiver 2. Still like him this week as my wide receiver 18. Behind Smith, another young wide receiver, a rookie here in Jordan Addison, coming off an absolute monster game against the 49ers. It was a little concerning that he didn't have a great game against the Bears, who were a much better matchup. Thought maybe this offense wouldn't look great without Justin Jefferson. Then he goes out against the infinitely tougher defense, puts on a masterclass. So Jordan Addison, got to feel great about him moving forward. And then shifting into tier 4, this is pretty much going to take us through a wide receiver 2s. Going to start this tier off with Zay Flowers. Hasn't necessarily hit in the touchdown department, but a very safe floor week to week. Going up against the Cardinals, really like that matchup there. Then we're going to have DJ Moore. No Justin Fields, which I do think is a hit. I like the matchup here against the Chargers. We saw Bajent kind of pepper him with targets last week. This may actually be low for DJ Moore, but once we're starting to get at this point, like a lot of these wide receivers feel like confident plays, but they're all kind of, very close together. Behind DJ Moore, we have T. Higgins. Now, a fully healthy T. Higgins paired with a fully healthy Joe Burrow is probably right around the wide receiver 12 spot. But prior to the bye week, we had Higgins dealing with the rib issue, and then Joe Burrow obviously with the calf all season long. So is Joe Burrow 100%? Is T. Higgins 100%? I guess we will wait and see for that on Sunday. My wide receiver 23 is going to be DK Metcalf. It looks like Metcalf has a decent shot to play, or at least he expects to play this week. He does draw a pretty tough matchup here against the Browns, which is why he's a little bit lower than he maybe normally would be. And then wide receiver 24, Michael Pittman. Dude has just been a rock all season long. Like the volume he's seen with Gardner Minshew. Didn't see a ton of volume last game, but prior to that, he had been a volume machine, so I do like him in my top 24. And then the final guy in this tier, Christian Kirk. Had to give Christian Kirk the nod this week over Calvin Ridley. I had been a Ridley over Kirk guy, pretty much all season long. It's got to change after what we saw last week. Not bearing Calvin Ridley, but Christian Kirk has been the more consistent guy week to week. And then shifting into tier 5, these are going to be like your mid to high end wide receiver 3s. We're going to start it off with Terry McLaurin. After kind of a slow start to the season, especially volume wise, he has really picked up the volume he's commanding. Eagles defense is tough, but the secondary hasn't been that lockdown. Receivers have been able to put together solid games, so I like Terry here. Garrett Wilson, kind of feels like Wilson's in the similar spot that he is in every week. Obviously, the quarterback play is not going to be great. They're still going to pepper him with targets, but the touchdown upside is just not really there compared to some of these other wide receivers. And then we're going to have Calvin Ridley sandwiched between these two Steelers wide receivers. Did just give George Pickens the edge, outperformed and actually out-targeted Deontay Johnson in their first game together. Don't necessarily know if that's going to continue, but Pickens has been so impressive. I do think he gets the edge. Deontay Johnson, good to see him solid in his first game back. Volume machine. And then Calvin Ridley. Like I said, I did drop him, but I didn't completely tank him. I feel like some people are writing him off like he is totally cooked. I can't get there. It was one bad game. The week before that, people were not saying that. People were firing him up as a mid-tier wide receiver too. I really would not be shocked if we saw a big bounce back here from Calvin Ridley against the Steelers. And then the final guy in tier 5, going to be Marquise Brown. Do we get Kyler Murray at quarterback here? He was a full participant in practice. Wouldn't be shocked if they just sit him out another week. Make sure he is fully 100% right. But regardless, I think Marquise Brown is a solid play. Honestly feels low having him here as like a mid-tier wide receiver 3, but the wide receiver position is just so stacked with no bye weeks. I mean, like last week, he was probably a mid-tier wide receiver 2 with the 6 teams on bye, so he really hasn't done anything wrong. It's just a very stacked position at this point in the season. And then the final tier, tier 6, going to start it off with Chris Godwin. Wide receiver 2 behind Mike Evans, but still very involved week to week. Still feel like he has some boom games in him moving forward. Then we're going to have Drake London. Kind of surprising to see Drake London ranked here above some of the guys I do have him ranked ahead of, especially with how we started off the season. But I really like the matchup here against the Titans. The Titans' run defense has been really tough, as they've been, pretty much over the last couple of seasons. And then the pass attack has really been where they've struggled. fantasy wide receivers have found some success. Drake London's been pretty solid since that goose egg. Like him here as my wide receiver 33. Tyler Lockett feels low for Lockett, but he draws a tough matchup here. This is obviously going to be assuming that DK Metcalf is playing. If Metcalf was out, you probably fire up Lockett to like a fringe wide receiver 2. But Lockett hasn't been ideal this season. I still think he's a decent option here as a wide receiver 3. Amari Cooper. Does hurt to rank Amari Cooper this low. I mean, with a healthy Deshaun Watson, he's probably a mid-tier wide receiver 2. The backup quarterback play has just not been great, especially when it's come to supporting their weapons. So that's why he takes a hit here. There's a lot of really quality wide receiver options. So tough break for Cooper. And then the final guy here, could have gone to a few different players. A lot of decent options here. Was kind of between Joshua Palmer and Josh Dobbs. Ended up going with Palmer going up against the Bears, but I think Josh Downs also could be a fair guy at that spot. But that's going to wrap it up for the top 36 wideouts here in Week 8. If you guys enjoyed the video, check out the running backs, hit that like button. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.